The night was heavy with rain, the streets wet and shining under the broken lamps. Cold wind pressed against every wall, every corner, and in that darkness she walked, barefoot and weak, her thin body shaking under a torn piece of cloth she used as a cloak. She was not just tired. She was empty, left with nothing. No food, no shelter, no hope. Only the sound of her steps in the lonely night. She was not human. Her skin held a faint glow that no one cared to notice anymore. Her eyes, once bright with life, now dull with hunger. Once she had a family, once she had a home. But all that had been stripped away. People had used her, broken her, and then thrown her out as if she was worth less than trash. The city was filled with humans, but none of them looked at her as a person. When she passed, they pulled their children closer. They whispered about her. Some even spat on the ground. She walked through the market streets that were now silent after closing. Only the smell of old bread and waste remained. Her stomach cried, but she kept walking, because to stop was to remember the past, and remembering hurt more than the hunger. The rain grew harder, pressing her down, her hair sticking to her face, her body shaking like a leaf in the storm, her breath weak. She stopped at a broken lamppost, the only light flickering, a weak yellow glow that died and came back like it was fighting to stay alive just as she was. Her legs gave up under her. She fell to her knees. The stone was wet and cold. She pressed her arms around herself, trying to stop the shiver, trying to hold back the tears, but they came anyway, hot against the cold air. In a whisper, her voice broken, she said to no one, "I wish I could just disappear." Her words were lost in the sound of rain. No one would care if she did, she thought. No one would even notice, but someone did notice. From the other side of the street, a man walked home from a long day of work, his boots heavy, his jacket soaked, his face lined with tiredness. He was just another human in the city, nothing special, but his eyes caught the faint shape under the lamp. He slowed his steps. At first he thought it was just another drunk lying in the rain. But then he saw her hands shaking, her shoulders curling tight, her whole body too thin, too fragile. Something inside him told him to keep walking, to mind his own business after all. Who knew what kind of trouble it was, but he stopped anyway. He stood there for a moment, watching the way she clutched her chest like she was holding herself together. He could hear her faint cough over the rain. The woman felt a shadow fall over her. Her eyes lifted slowly, and for a heartbeat she froze. A human was standing there, tall, dark hair dripping with rain, his eyes fixed on her. She waited for him to spit at her, to curse, to tell her to leave. That was what they always did. But he did not. He crouched down slowly, his voice quiet but strong. "Are you all right?" Her lips trembled. She wanted to answer, but no sound came. Her throat was dry, her fear stronger than her voice. She just shook her head, small, weak like a child afraid of punishment. The man saw the pain in her eyes, and something in his chest tightened. He had seen misery before, he had felt it himself, but this was different. She looked like she was already halfway gone, like she was one breath away from never rising again. The rain beat harder, the wind howled, and for a long second, both of them stayed there, staring at each other, one broken and hopeless, the other unsure but unwilling to walk away. Finally, he reached out his hand, not fast, not forceful, but gentle, waiting to see if she would accept. She looked at his hand, confusion in her eyes. No one had ever offered her help. Not like this. Her chest rose and fell with a shaky breath, and though fear burned inside her, her trembling fingers slowly touched his palm. That single touch carried more weight than words, more than promises. The man stood, pulling her up with surprising strength. She stumbled, but he steadied her, his arm firm around her, protecting her from the storm. She was left with nothing, but in that moment, for the first time in a long time, she was not alone, and that was the beginning. The small room smelled faintly of smoke and old wood. The fire crackled low in the stone hearth, giving off weak light. The sound of rain still beat against the windows. Outside, the world was gray and unkind, but inside the human's home there was at least warmth. He had carried her here through the storm, his arms strong though his body tired. He placed her gently on a worn chair near the fire. She was dripping wet, her hair clinging to her skin, her cloak heavy with water, her thin frame shaking without control. He did not know who she was or what had brought her so low, but he knew one thing. If he left her out there, she would not live to see the sunrise. The man's name was Daniel, a worker who had little himself. He lived in a small house on the edge of the city, a place most people ignored. He did not have riches, he did not have power, but he had a heart that still cared. Even after years of hardship, she sat still, her eyes darting around the room as if expecting chains to fall from the ceiling. Her hands twisted in her lap. She did not trust this place. She did not trust him. Every muscle in her body told her to run, but she had nowhere to go, nowhere safe. Daniel knelt near the fire, throwing in more wood. The flames grew, dancing shadows over the walls. He turned his head to her slowly, speaking in a calm, low voice. "You're safe here," he said. "I won't hurt you." Her lips parted, but no words came. She had been told such things before, only to feel pain after. Promises had always been lies to her kind, yet his eyes held no hunger, no cruelty, only tired kindness. It was strange, almost frightening in its gentleness. He rose and walked to the small table, pulling out a loaf of bread and a bit of stew he had saved. The smell filled the room. He placed the bowl in front of her, along with a piece of bread. Then he stepped back, giving her space, not forcing, just waiting. The woman looked at the food as if it were a trap. Her stomach cried, twisting with hunger, but her mind whispered fear. She remembered hands pushing her face down, voices laughing, telling her she was lucky to even eat scraps. Her chest tightened. She did not want to live those memories again. Daniel did not move closer. He simply said, "It's yours." His tone plain, no demand, no price, just a simple offer. Her fingers, trembling, reached slowly for the bread. She held it like it might vanish, then raised it to her lips. She bit, soft and small. The taste was plain, but to her it felt like fire spreading through her empty body. Tears filled her eyes without warning. She quickly wiped them away, afraid he would see, afraid he would mock her weakness, but Daniel did not mock. He only turned back to the fire, letting her eat in silence. Minutes passed. She finished the bread, sipping the stew carefully, each swallow easing the ache in her chest. Her eyes softened slightly, though her body remained tense. Finally, she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Why?" Daniel looked over his shoulder. "Why what?" "Why help me?" she said, her hands tight around the bowl. "Others turn away. They spit. They hate us." He studied her for a moment, then answered simply, "Because no one else will." The words struck her, sharp and heavy. She lowered her gaze, her chest trembling. She had no answer, no memory of kindness like this. That night, she drifted into uneasy sleep near the fire, her head resting against the chair, her body curled tight like a frightened child. She dreamed of chains rattling, of cruel faces, of voices telling her she was nothing. But when she woke, the nightmare broke, for she saw Daniel still there, sitting near the fire with tired eyes, watching, making sure the flames stayed alive. She stared at him quietly, something new stirring in her chest, something she had not felt in so long that it almost hurt, hope. Yet the question haunted her. Was this real? Or just another cruel trick waiting to fall? And so the night passed with silence, but inside her heart, the first seeds of trust began to grow, fragile as glass, but alive. The fire burned low, soft red light glowing across the small room. The storm outside had passed, but the air still carried the chill of night. The alien woman lay half awake in the chair, her thin arms wrapped around herself, her body still trembling from memories that clung tighter than the cold. She opened her eyes and saw him still there. Daniel, sitting near the fire, his head resting back, his eyes heavy but awake. He had not left her side, even when he could have. He had not locked the door. He had not tied her hands. He had not demanded payment. He simply stayed, guarding the flames, watching quietly. Her throat ached with questions she dared not ask. She had known humans before, but their kindness was sharp like a blade, always waiting for the moment when the mask would drop. She feared this too. She feared what price would be revealed later, and yet her heart whispered something different, whispering that maybe this one was not the same. When she thought he was not looking, she let her tears fall, silent streams that slid down her face. They fell into her hands, her body shaking as she tried to keep the sobs quiet. But Daniel noticed. His gaze moved to her, soft and careful. He did not speak at once. He only watched, as if trying to understand without scaring her. Finally, in a low voice, he said, "You don't have to hide that." Her head jerked up, fear flashing in her eyes. She quickly wiped her cheeks, shaking her head. "No," she whispered. "I must be strong. No one cares for weakness." Her words came broken, pieces of a story untold. Daniel leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his voice steady. "Crying doesn't make you weak, it makes you alive." She stared at him, stunned, her lips parted, but no sound came. "Alive," he had said, a word she had not thought of in years. Her hands clutched the edge of the chair. "Why?" she whispered again. "Why help me? You don't even know me. I am not one of you." Daniel's face was calm, lined with tiredness but not cruelty. "Because it doesn't matter. You're here, you're suffering, and I've seen too much of that already. I can't walk past it anymore." Her chest shook. The tears she tried to bury came again, and this time she could not stop them. She pressed her hands over her face, the sobs spilling into the room, muffled but real. Daniel did not move closer. He did not touch her. He only sat back, letting her cry. His silence was not cold. It was steady, safe, giving her space to pour out what she had held in for too long. Minutes stretched like hours. The only sounds were the soft crackle of fire and the broken rhythm of her sobs. Finally, her body sagged, drained. Her hands dropped to her lap, her eyes red and swollen, but lighter somehow, like a weight had shifted. She whispered through her tears, "They told me I was nothing. Only good for their orders, only good when silent. They took everything, my home, my people, even my name." Her voice cracked. "I am nobody now." Daniel's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "Then we'll start from here," he said. "Nobody doesn't sit by my fire. You're somebody, whether they wanted to see it or not." Her breath caught, her eyes wide. She searched his face for mockery, for cruelty, but found none. Only truth spoken plain. And that truth broke her heart more than any insult had, because it was the first time someone had said she was worth something. She closed her eyes, the tears falling again, but softer now. Not from fear, but from something else she could not name. That night, as exhaustion pulled her into sleep, she dreamt again. But this time the dream was not all chains and shadows. There was also firelight, and the steady figure of a man who did not leave. A man who had no reason to care but cared anyway. When she woke before dawn, her eyes heavy but her chest strangely lighter, she saw Daniel still there, the fire still alive, his shoulders slouched as sleep finally claimed him. And for the first time in years, she whispered something soft, something almost like a prayer. "Thank you." The words were for him, but also for herself, for the fragile spark of hope that had survived the storm. The morning came slowly, gray light slipping through the cracks of the window. The rain had stopped, but the streets outside were still wet, quiet and heavy with the smell of mud. Inside the small house, the fire had burned down to soft embers, warm enough to fight the chill. The alien woman stirred first, her eyes blinking open, her body stiff from sleeping in the chair. For a moment she forgot where she was. Panic gripped her chest, the same panic that always came after waking. The fear of callers, the fear of voices calling her to obey. But then she saw him, Daniel, the human, still asleep on the floor near the hearth, his head tilted against the wall, his breathing deep and calm. He had stayed, all night, like a guard who owed her nothing yet kept watch. Her heart stuttered in confusion. She had never been watched over without strings attached. Her eyes lingered on him, the faint scars on his hand, the tired lines of his face. He looked worn but steady. She wondered what kind of man risked himself for someone like her. The wooden floor creaked as she stood, her instinct screaming at her to leave before he woke, to run, to vanish before kindness turned into chains. She crept to the door, her hand shaking as it reached for the latch. Freedom was only a step away, but her stomach nodded. Freedom meant the street again, the cold, the hunger, the endless stares of hate. Her fingers froze on the latch. Behind her came a voice, quiet but certain. "You don't have to go." She spun around, startled. Daniel was awake, his eyes fixed on her, his voice calm, not angry, not pleading, just steady, like stone. She opened her mouth, but no words came, only a rush of shame heating her cheeks. Daniel stood slowly, brushing dust from his jacket. "You're safe here," he repeated, then walked past her without grabbing her arm, without blocking the door. He went to the table, set down a kettle, and started making tea. His movements casual, as though her leaving or staying was her choice alone. Her chest tightened. She was used to force, used to threats. Not this. Not freedom hidden inside simple words. I don't want to be a burden," she whispered, her voice trembling. Daniel looked at her, his eyes steady. "You're not," he said simply. "Everyone needs a place to stand. This can be yours, if you want it." The words hung in the air, sharp and heavy. She could not answer, her throat thick with emotion. Instead, she stepped back slowly, lowering her hand from the door, her knees weak. Later, as the sun rose, Daniel showed her small things: how to stir the pot so the stew would not burn, how to fold the blanket neatly, how to place wood in the fire so it lasted longer. His tone was patient, never sharp, never mocking. He treated her not as a tool but as a person, each act strange to her, each act cutting deeper into the wall she had built around herself. At one point, his dog, a small, scruffy creature with bright eyes, trotted into the room. The animal sniffed her legs, wagged its tail, and curled up beside her chair. She stiffened, unused to such closeness, but the warmth of its body pressed against her cold skin, and slowly, carefully, her hand moved to its fur. It licked her fingers, making her laugh softly. The sound was small, almost broken, but it was the first laugh she had given in years. Daniel glanced up, surprised, then smiled faintly. He did not speak. He let the moment breathe, but in the shadows of her mind, fear still lingered. What if the ones who had broken her came searching? What if this fragile piece shattered with a knock at the door? She did not trust the world. Not yet, but something inside her, fragile as glass, whispered that maybe, just maybe, she could trust him. That night, as the fire burned again, she sat closer than before, her hands resting on her knees. She spoke quietly. "I don't remember the last time I felt safe." Daniel's eyes softened, his voice steady. "Then start here. Start tonight." Her eyes stung with tears, but this time she did not hide them. She let them fall. And when he handed her a cup of tea, her trembling fingers took it, not with fear, but with the first spark of trust. And in that small house, in the glow of a simple fire, trust began to grow, fragile but real, a thread pulling her from the darkness into something she had almost forgotten: belonging. The days passed quietly inside Daniel's small home. The alien woman, still too afraid to share her name, began to find rhythm in the simple tasks he showed her: stirring the stew, folding the blanket, learning when to add wood to the fire. Each act felt strange but strangely healing. She was no longer wandering the streets like a ghost. She had warmth, she had food, and she had silence that did not come with fear. Yet deep in her chest, shadows still curled. Every laugh she allowed, every soft breath of comfort she took carried the weight of doubt. She knew the world outside had not forgotten her. The ones who had broken her still walked its streets, men with harsh voices, with cruel eyes, with chains hidden in their hands. And every night as she lay on the chair by the fire, she wondered, what if they come? What if they find me here? One evening, the sun dipped low, painting the wet cobblestones outside in deep orange light. Daniel had gone to fetch water from the pump, Leaving her alone with the dog curled at her feet, she sat by the window, her thin fingers tracing the rough wood frame, her heart strangely calm, but then she froze. From the street, heavy boots echoed, steady and sure. Voices carried through the still air, sharp, commanding, not the voices of neighbors. No, these were voices she knew, the ones that haunted her nightmares. Check every house, one said, rough and cold. She couldn't have gone far. Worthless thing belongs to us. Her chest tightened. Her breath caught. Fear surged through, her veins like fire. She stumbled back from the window, her hand pressed to her mouth to hold in a scream. Her body shaking. They found me. The knock came loud, sudden, shaking the door on its hinges. Open up, a voice roared. We know she's in there. Her knees buckled. She slid down against the wall, tears burning her eyes. She whispered, No, please no. The dog barked, sharp and loud, circling her as if trying to shield her. The door latch rattled. Another voice snapped, If you don't open, we'll break it down. Just then Daniel returned, water sloshing in the bucket he carried. His eyes narrowed at the sight of shadows looming outside his door. He set the bucket down hard, his jaw tight. Stay behind me, he said firmly, his voice low but unshaking. She stared at him with wide, terrified eyes, her body frozen. They'll take me, she whispered. They always take me back. Daniel stepped to the door, his hand steady on the wood, his voice raised. She doesn't belong to you. Laughter erupted from the other side, cruel and mocking. Not. Yours to decide, human. Move aside or you'll regret it. Her hands clutched at the blanket, her heart raced. This was it. The fragile peace shattered. She waited for him to step away, to hand her over like everyone else had before, because why would he risk himself for her? What was she worth? But Daniel did not move. He planted his feet firm, his back straight, his voice cold as steel. Then you'll have to go through me. Silence followed, heavy, thick. Then came the sound of fists pounding the wood. The door shook. The hinges groaned. She screamed softly, curling into herself, her body trembling, images of chains burning in her mind. Daniel's eyes burned with something she had not seen before. Not pity, not sympathy, but fury. A fire that lit his face in the dim glow of the house. He turned his head slightly toward her, his voice softer. I won't let them take you. Her breath caught. She wanted to believe, wanted to cling to those words, but fear screamed louder inside her. The pounding grew harder, the wood starting to crack. Break it, one of them shouted outside. Her body shook. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She whispered brokenly, They'll kill you. Please, just give me to them. Daniel's hand clenched into a fist, his voice sharp. No, he said, fierce and final. You're not theirs. Not anymore. The door shook again, the lock splintering, the moment heavy with tension. And in that breath before the storm, she realized, this man, this human who owed her nothing, was willing to fight the darkness she had run from all her life, even if it meant standing alone. The knock became a crash. The wood splintered, and the past she feared so deeply had returned to claim her, but this time she was not facing it alone. The door split with a deafening crack, shards of wood scattering across the floor. The cold night air rushed in as three men pushed their way inside, their boots heavy, their eyes sharp and cruel. Each carried the stink of power and arrogance, the kind that fed on fear. The alien woman shrank back against the wall, her breath ragged, her hands gripping the blanket so tightly her knuckles turned white. She whispered, No, not again. Her voice breaking like glass. Daniel stepped forward, his body between her and the intruders, his frame straight, his jaw tight, his hands clenched into fists. He had no weapons, no armor, just himself. But his eyes burned like fire, steady, unyielding. The tallest of the men sneered, his voice rough. Move, human, she's ours. He spat the word like poison. Do you know what she is? She doesn't belong with you. She belongs to us. Daniel's voice cut through the room, cold and sharp. She belongs to no one. Laughter erupted, sharp and cruel. The men stepped closer, their shadows stretching across the small room. The woman whimpered, curling tighter, every muscle in her body screaming with memories of chains and commands. But Daniel did not back away. The first man lunged, swinging a fist, but Daniel moved fast, his arm blocking the strike, his counterpunch, landing square on the man's jaw. The crack of bone echoed. The intruder stumbled, cursing. The second man rushed forward with a broken piece of wood from the shattered door, swinging hard. Daniel caught the blow with his forearm. Pain shot through him, but he held strong, shoving the man backward with raw force. The fight was close, brutal. The smell of sweat and fear filling the small house. The alien woman watched with wide, tear-filled eyes, her heart pounding. She wanted to scream, wanted to run, but her legs would not move. She could only watch as this human, this man who had nothing to gain, fought like a storm for her. Twing. Dog barked furiously, darting at the men's legs, snapping at their boots, adding to the chaos. The tallest man pulled a knife, the dim firelight catching the blade, his voice a growl. "You'll die for her." Daniel's chest heaved, his lip bloodied, but his eyes did not waver. "Better that than let you take her," he growled back. The knife slashed, catching Daniel's arm, blood spilled, the pain sharp. But he did not stop. His fist slammed into the man's stomach, his knee drove upward. The fight became a blur of fists, curses, and breaking wood. The alien woman pressed her hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. No one had ever fought for her, not like this, not with such fury. She could see it in his eyes. This was not pity, not guilt. This was choice. His choice to protect her, to stand between her and the chains of her past. The men grew desperate, their cruelty clashing against Daniel's rage. One by one he drove them back, his body battered but unbroken, until finally, the tallest man fell against the broken door frame, blood dripping from his mouth, his knife clattering to the floor. "Get out," Daniel snarled, his voice low and dangerous. "If I see you near this house again, I'll bury you where you stand." For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then the men cursed, stumbling into the night, their boots fading into the distance, the broken door swinging half open behind them. The woman slid down the wall, her body trembling, her breath shallow. Daniel turned, his arm bleeding, his chest rising and falling with exhaustion. But his eyes softened when they met hers, she whispered, her voice shaking. Why would you do that?" "They would have killed you." Daniel wiped the blood from his lip, his voice calm but steady. "Because you're not theirs," he said. "Because you're worth more than chains." Her heart broke all over again, but this time not from pain. From something she had forgotten. Hope. Her tears flowed freely as she whispered, no one has ever fought for me." Daniel knelt, wincing from the pain in his arm, his voice low but firm. "Then remember this night," he said. "Because you're not alone anymore." She reached out, her trembling fingers brushing his hand. The simple touch carried more weight than words. And in that moment she knew. The past had returned to claim her. But the human stand had broken its hold. The fire flickered low, the night heavy with silence. But inside that broken house, a new strength was born, forged in blood, fear, and the unyielding will of one human who refused to let her be taken. The night was quiet again, though the silence carried a different weight. Broken wood lay across the floor, the smell of blood still sharp in the air, and the fire burned low, casting faint light over the wreckage. Daniel leaned against the wall, his arm wrapped in cloth to stop the bleeding, his chest rising and falling with exhaustion. Across the room, the alien woman sat frozen, her back against the chair, her hands pressed over her heart as if trying to steady it, her eyes locked on him, wide and wet. She could still hear the shouts, still see the knife flash, still feel the terror of her past clawing at her, but more than that, she saw him, standing there, refusing to move, refusing to give her up. He had chosen her. Her breath hitched, tears spilling down her cheeks. She whispered softly, "You should have let them take me." Her voice cracked. "They'll only come back. You could have died for nothing." Daniel looked at her, his jaw tight, but his eyes gentle. "I don't care if they come back," he said, voice steady. "I don't care how many times they knock on that door. I'll stand here every time." Her lips trembled. She shook her head. "Why? I have nothing to give you. I am broken, worthless." He pushed off the wall, wincing at the pain in his arm, and walked toward her, slow, steady steps. He crouched down in front of her, his voice low but fierce. "You're not worthless. Don't ever believe that again." His eyes searched hers. "You are alive, and that is enough." Her tears came harder, sobs shaking her frame. She tried to turn away, but Daniel reached out, his hand brushing her cheek. Gentle, patient, not forcing, just there. She flinched at first, then slowly leaned into his touch, the warmth of his hand melting the ice of years. He pulled her forward, wrapping his arms. Around her trembling body she froze, every muscle tense, then slowly, carefully she let herself sink into the embrace, her face pressed against his chest, her tears soaking his shirt, his arms strong around her, holding her as if she mattered, as if she was worth protecting. The world outside still carried danger, still carried the cruelty of men who wanted to break her again. But in his arms, for the first time, she felt safe, truly safe. Her breathing slowed, her body softened, her heart pounding not with fear but with something she barely remembered. Belonging. She whispered against his chest, voice small. "I don't deserve this." Daniel's reply was simple, steady. "You deserve to be free, you deserve to be held. You deserve more than they ever gave you." Her sobs softened into quiet tears, her hands gripping his shirt as if afraid he would vanish. But he did not. He only held her tighter, steady as stone. Time passed, the fire dimmed, the night deepened. Yet she stayed in his arms, afraid to let go, afraid the moment would break, but slowly she realized. This was not a dream, not a trick. This was real. When she finally lifted her head, her face streaked with tears, she looked into his eyes. "I don't even have a name anymore," she whispered, broken but honest. "They took it, they stripped it away." Daniel's brow softened, his hand brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Then we'll choose one together," he said. "You don't need them to tell you who you are. You'll decide it yourself." Her chest tightened, her lips trembling. The idea felt impossible, yet his voice made it real. She leaned into him again, whispering, "Then I'll start with this. I am not theirs anymore." His arms tightened around her, his voice firm. "No, you're mine now. Not as property, not as chain, but as family." The word family broke her heart open. Her tears fell again. But these were not the same. Tears of fear, they were lighter, freer. She nodded against his chest, whispering, "Then I belong here with you." Daniel's hand rested against the back of her head, his voice quiet but certain. "Yes, you do." The night closed around them, but inside the broken little house, something whole was born, a fragile bond that no chains could break, a bond of trust, of safety, of belonging. She had been left with nothing, stripped of hope, of name, of worth, but now wrapped in the arms of a human who refused to let her fall. She found everything she thought she had lost, and in that embrace she was no longer alone.